Hey there. I was just typing a message. Gosh, this is really great that there's a big update to Cubase 14. I have not had a chance to dig into it since it was released today, but I will and probably have an update for you guys very soon. I'm super excited about the option of importing Dorico projects into Cubase. But what I wanted to talk about today, since I already kind of spent some time on it, and I think it's still super relevant, is this idea of how you can develop a workflow within your studio, which is what I like to focus on Wednesdays, that's going to be fast and reliable and help you stay in that creative flow. That's something that I think a lot of composers find challenging because the world of computers is just not conducive to the creative mind frame. There's a lot of hassles we run into setting up MIDI controllers, setting up templates, setting up expression maps, configuring instruments, sample libraries, volumes, levels, mixers, audio interfaces, MIDI interfaces, crosstalk and traffic where you turn a knob and it's doing the wrong thing, right? We all experienced that, and weeding your way through all of that mess and getting to the place where you have a great workflow is something I'm hoping to illuminate today through three sort of core principles, mainly because these are three things that I know I use on a daily basis, and probably more than any other things that I've invested time in learning and developing have definitely made the biggest impact on how quickly I can work and how professionally I can produce content very quickly, produce music very quickly. Now, I will just say before I get into this, this is fairly technical. Um, but it is in service of a creative mind frame, right? And although I produce music all the time and I'm doing it very quickly, and I often sort of harp on that point, I also love music, and I recognize that most people want to stay connected with that. Their real enthusiasm and drive behind this all is that they love music. And with a well set up workflow and environment, you can have a whole orchestra at your fingertips, and you can do amazing things. I've just this last week learned so much, and it seems like every week I learn so much. Anyway, I don't want to get too far off topic. Let's kind of talk about what these three principles are. And if anyone has comments, questions, please post them in the comments, and I will check it out. Okay. But the first thing is a template-driven workflow. If you don't have a template-driven workflow and you're trying to increase your speed, or you're even just trying to have more fun composing, I highly recommend spending some time investing in templates. So I have a template for Dorico, and then I also have a template for Cubase, and those are my main two software packages that I use when I'm composing or mixing or producing. And the main features of those template driven workflow is consistency. And that sort of that's actually going to be true of all three of these principles, which I've got over here. Sorry, I can't always tell which side I'm on when I'm looking on my monitor. Template driven, MIDI controllers, and automation are all in service of consistency. And that's, I think, one of the things that you can really benefit from by focusing on these areas is when you grab a knob on your MIDI controller, does it do exactly what you thought it did, or does it accidentally do something else? And I'm going to talk a little bit about how to avoid that. When you load up your Dorico template, can you start writing right away, or are you immediately spending 10, 15 minutes trying to figure out which expression maps to load and instruments and instrument families and all that junk? If you are, which I know that feeling, and it's super distracting. It gets me out of the creative flow right away. And if I have to do that, honestly, I build up a block where I just don't really want to compose, because really composing becomes troubleshooting a computer. So I will just mention, just as a quick aside, I've actually set aside a few hours each week where I only do tech stuff. And when I run into a tech problem in my workflow, I just make a note of it in a text file, and when I get to that portion of my week, I just go through and I solve tech problems, and that's all I'm doing. I'm not solving tech problems while I'm writing music. I'm not doing the two. I just solve tech problems on Thursdays. All other days of the week, I'm writing music. I'll just leave that as an aside. Now, back to this template-driven workflow thing, I think it's really helpful to have a sketch-oriented template. So not necessarily everything that you might ever want, but tools to get up and running really fast. And what I want to demo here today is how I do that, and hopefully show you that within a few minutes I can get the whole sort of workflow, the whole enchilada working for me. And that includes writing down some ideas, some, starting to create a musical diary, as well as getting that information from Dorico into Cubase, which now with Cubase 14 should be a lot, or the update to 0.20 should be a lot easier. But I'm going to show you how I've done it in the past, because I haven't got the new version kind of familiar with my head yet. And then also using CC mapping and CC expression to make the performances a lot richer. So you're going to see me using my templates. You can see me using my MIDI controllers, and you're going to see how I use automation within the MIDI to get a better result. And this is all going to take a few minutes. And that's because it's template driven and I have a very consistent workflow. This is the way that I always start and run my projects. All right, so hey Alan, hey Rich, hey Gary. I don't know if Gary's still here. I think he had posted pretty early. Yeah, I'm just reading Alan's comment here. Mouse at any point in the streamline project should go there. Yeah, I'm sure that there are. I think that issue is somewhat tied in with, and I'm kind of speaking off the cuff here, based on what I've observed in the forums. I think that behavior that you're talking about, Alan, is somehow related to Finale users who have come over to Dorico. And I think there's some discussion about how to implement that. So I think it's certainly something that the developers are aware of and they're trying to work on. But I know that any kind of barrier to workflow, especially given the topic we're covering today, can be a real hassle. Anyway, let me start off here. I'm going to switch over to this view, my desktop. And this is kind of where I start in Dorico. And I'm just going to create a new project. I personally start with this template. This is a template I made. It's just got 2 piano grand staffs in it. So I'm just going to call this, demo, create a project in the key of C. All right, and then I'll open this up full. I've got a bunch of Stream Deck buttons set up so I can switch to galley view very quickly. One of my favorite features in Dorico is being able to put in rhythms before melodies. So I actually have that all set up on my Stream Deck 2. So I've got sort of a, this is the way I typically work. I have sort of an idea in my head. The idea that I have right now is a quarter note, 2/8, 2/4, and I'm typing this out basically in with buttons on my Stream Deck. So that's my rhythmic idea. I have kind of a counter line as well, which is something like this: 2/2, 2/8, and another half. Okay, so I type out my rhythms very quick. I've got these pianos already set up in my sketch, and you guys should be hearing that. So then I go ahead and I lock durations, which again I have a button for, and now I can, sorry, let me go in there. So I get this little sort of ditty here. I'll do the same thing here. I hit lock durations, and basically this keeps the note lengths the same, but take whatever I type into my keyboard into account. So I'm going to do G, G, what do I have? Something like that. All right, I kind of prefabbed this. I was practicing, making sure that this would be something musical, because this is usually how I work. I start with an idea, I write down the motif, I write down a counter line, And I'm writing it in piano because I don't want to be concerned with expression maps or anything complicated quite yet. And I find usually having 2 grand staves is enough for me. Maybe I add a rhythmic engine or maybe some variations, an inversion, something like that. But once I have this up here, I'll decide, okay, well, that's all well and good. I'll go ahead and save this. I'm going to save it in this case to the live stream. And I have a folder structure that I always use, so I just throw that in there. And then what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll grab, I'm going to put this in violin and viola. I want to make sure that those are enabled on both my layout and that. And then I'll also go ahead back to right. And I'll just move these, now that I've sketched out my ideas, I have this counter line, which, I may put in horns or I may put in cello. I'm just putting it in cello here to offer sort of a simple example, but I think anybody who's composing on a regular basis can understand what I'm doing here. I've got a motif and I've got a counter line. Now, when I load up my violin, when I load up my cello like this, all the expression maps, all the instruments, the families, all that configuration in Dorico is taken care of, and that's the kind of thing that I do on my tech day on Thursdays. Now, what I've done in the past is I then have to export this MIDI, right? Now, I guess there'll be the option of importing it directly into Cubase, and I'm going to look into that so that I can present on that, but I don't really want to present on anything that new without having really even spent some time with it. So what I'll do then is I'm going to close this project up. That's what I do in Dorico a lot of the time. That's all I do. Then I'm going to bring up Cubase, and again I've got a template here. So my template connects to all my VE Pro instruments. The templates are going to be filled with macros. A lot of my Stream Deck buttons are macros. I have MIDI knobs and MIDI controllers all connected to different things like pre-gain when I'm mixing, or the control room volume, things like that. And every time I make significant changes, I actually save a new template and I just give it the date. So I just pick whatever the latest date is, and every now and then I go in and I delete these really old ones. But that way, because I'll realize, oh, I really want a different busing system for something or other. I'll update the buses and I'll realize that's something I want in the future, right? Or adding a new MIDI controller, adding a new MIDI remote in Cubase, which is awesome. Maybe configurations around CC automation or host automation. So anyway, it really helps to make sure that each time I load up a Cubase project, I'm loading up the most recent. All right, so I'll go ahead, create my Cubase folder under the project. Here it's a live stream, but I have a production folder, and every time I start a new track, I just have a folder with, that represents that track. Now what's going on here is it's loading up and connecting with all of my VE Pro instances. So VE Pro just kind of sits over there. It's loaded up all my instruments. There are still many cases where I will load instruments directly into Cubase, especially for synths or sometimes phrase-based things. That's very, very common that I'll do that. But for anything orchestral and things that I use a lot, I just have it set up like this and it just loads up right away. Okay, so this is again how I used to do it. I'll probably be adopting a somewhat more streamlined approach now that you can import, as you can see, you can import the Dorico project. But like I said, I'm not going to do that until I have a chance to look at it. Instead, I'm going to import a MIDI file. I do not want to create a new project, no. I'm going to go down here. Let's see, I think this was the thing that I just exported. So yeah, then I get these, right? Get these tracks right here. And when I play it, you can see the MIDI triggering, but of course there's nothing happening there, and that is because over here in the routing is routing to my Stream Deck or whatever the default is. I actually have macros set up to connect these. So when I actually choose, it takes a second for it to work, but now you can see that it's actually connecting to my VE Pro. So this is connected to VE Pro port 1, and this is port 4. And now I need to make sure that that is actually up on the live stream. Let me see. Oh yeah, you guys should be hearing that. I'm not hearing it, but that's on me because I'm listening here in my studio and I don't like there to be audio. There you go. I don't want too much feedback over the mics, okay? But because I've set up macros and they're built into my templates and my template's already connected to VE Pro, just like that, I'm in Cubase, where honestly I prefer to do all my automation. And so let's talk about the second factor, which is MIDI controllers. Now I've got a keyboard which was already connected to Dorico so that I could quickly input notes, but I also have a machine controller that I use sometimes for tapping out rhythms. I've got a bunch of knobs. I've got my Control S88 keyboard, the Native Instruments here, with knobs and buttons which sometimes set articulations like staccato or legato. Sometimes they open up windows, like I have a button here that'll just open up the window settings for an individual track, which is really nice. Maybe even open up the instrument, which in this case is just a VE Pro instance, but if I had loaded up some contact instrument, it just loads it up, and I have those buttons right here, which is really nice. But let's talk about MIDI controllers from the standpoint of automation, because down here in the lanes, which I'm sure anybody who uses Cubase on a regular basis is aware, you know, this is key to especially good orchestral production, is to have CCs. And I've got right here on my faders, I've got my CC11, as you can see, moving right here. And this is just already connected, CC1, CC11, and CC7 on 3 different faders. And so I'll come in here and I'll decide, you know, I really just, on this piece of MIDI here, I want to add a little bit of expression so that it's not just like, you know, playing those hard equal velocity notes or something like that. So I go into my key editor here. I make sure that I got MIDI input on, and I go ahead and hit record. And there you go. That's that easy. I've got that. And I'll turn it up so that you can hear it better. So just being able to add that expression sort of effortlessly like that is part of having the template-driven model, part of having the MIDI controllers set up correctly. And now I have this automation. It's CC automation. It's built into the MIDI part, and I can just play it in. And if I don't like it, I just do another take. You know, I just keep doing that until it's perfect, basically. So yes, sorry I didn't take a gander at these questions. Yeah, thank you, Alan. I am going to keep an eye on that as well, and I'm following as many of the people who allow me to follow them on the forums and keeping track of how these changes take place as well. But you're very welcome for ongoing videos. I love doing this. It's keeping me on my toes too, and so it's really helpful for me professionally. And Rich, yes, as you've already figured out, yeah, I'm running VE Pro on the same computer. I'm running an M2 Max MacBook Pro, so it's a laptop, but it's got plenty of beef. It's got 64 gigs of RAM, and I run the entire Berlin series on there without really any problems or any latency issues. I will say, just as an aside, because I guess this also is part of having a consistent workflow. I invested last Black Friday on an RME interface, and while I don't, pretend to tell people what are good and bad products in the world, I will say that getting the RME interface, as pricey as it was, dramatically improved my workflow, primarily because my computer stopped crashing. It's amazing, and that's what RME is known for, and that's what appealed to me about it. So before, I was having problems, and I thought it might have been VE Pro based, which is why I thought of this, Rich, because of your comment. And I thought maybe I was loading too many instruments in, maybe it was a RAM problem. But I learned actually that in my view now, I reflect back, and it was a driver issue. It was drivers, that just weren't that robust, and I was relying on them for all of the audio interface features. And as I switched from Cubase to Dorico, back to Cubase, that sort of thing, something would go wrong. So anyway, that had a huge impact on my workflow as well. But this template-driven approach makes it so that in minutes, I'm producing music, I'm writing motifs, I'm able to transfer them around any instrument I want, and I'm just really staying in the creative vibe. I haven't really used my keyboard or mouse very much at all. Certainly no more than I'm using buttons and knobs and my actual piano keyboard, which is what I like. I want to play music, I want to feel music, and I want to sort of express myself through the ideas rather than sit there with, umpteen keyboard shortcuts, as useful as they are. So the final thing I want to point out, because I think it's really central to an understanding of good workflow, is three different kinds of automation. I don't think many people fully understand that there are actually three kinds of automation. So there's the typical kind of MIDI CC learn or MIDI learn, where you have a MIDI controller, it spits out some kind of value, and you hit learn, whether you're in whatever software you're in, and then it learns it and then it runs it. The problem, in my view, with that, and why I avoid that at almost all costs, is that eventually I wind up with the most convenient knob learned to a bunch of different things. I can't remember what they're all doing. And then every now and then I find there's crosstalk, and I turned a knob and I was trying to change the cutoff on a filter, but I actually wound up changing the volume on the double bass or something horrible like that, and then I have to go back and undo all those problems. So I don't really use MIDI learn unless I know it's really short term, and I actually have a couple of knobs and buttons reserved just for that, so I know that those buttons and knobs should never really be relied on, because who knows what they're assigned to. But generally, I'm going to use CC specific and channel specific assignments for my MIDI controllers, and I actually have a database, like a spreadsheet that I keep in Notion, and that lists out exactly what channel it's on and what the CC values are and what they do in different contexts. So my keyboard, unfortunately, only spits out CC data on channel 1. Some of the controls that I can manipulate on the S88, I can say what channel it goes out on, but in terms of the piano keys, they only go out on channel 1. And sometimes that can be a little limiting, right? But having a spreadsheet where I can go and I can see very quickly, if I send CC3 out on channel 4, do I have that assigned to anything already? Is it going to cause headaches for me? And if I see no, then I'll make the assignment and I add it to my database that, that's what CC3 does on channel 4 or whatever. And what it does, that's a Dorico setting. And then I just have an ongoing reference. I think it's really important to keep track of that. So that's the second kind of automation, CC automation, whether it's controlling a knob like cutoff or a fader, or it's adding, I use them to add articulations in Dorico. So I have buttons I can hit for, staccato or legato or the soft attack or the long attack, whatever I need. I have that all documented in a list. Now, the third kind of automation that I think a lot of people are much less familiar with, because it's a little bit obscured but extremely useful, is host automation. Now, host automation is different because it's typically something that you need to actually engage in your VST. So if you're in Contact or you're in some other software package that allows MIDI through host automation, what that means is that instead of, say, Cubase kind of looking downwards towards the VST and listening for something like it does in a learn MIDI, in a learn automation situation, the plugin actually sends data up and exposes things. So you have to actually say, I want to enable host automation for this control, and then it surfaces that and spits that up to your DAW. And your DAW recognizes it. It's really nice because it maintains a lot of consistency across projects. If I use host automation, it takes that extra step of saying, yeah, I want to expose it. I do this a lot with Hallion, which is Steinberg's sort of mega sound design tool and sort of sampler contact-alike environment, although it's much more than that. It has a method of surfacing just about any control as host automation. And then when I turn that knob in the VST, it writes the automation automatically in Cubase. So it's really nice because when I come back and load up that same instrument later on, all of those same assignments are still preserved. If I load up the project where I had all that automation running, I don't have to worry about whether or not maybe I changed my MIDI CC assignment since the last time I opened this project. It's all preserved. It's locked in. It's like, it's super solid. So I won't go on and on about it. But automation, there's a learn automation. I try not to use that unless it's really temporary. CC automation I use all the time, but I document it so that I know exactly what I've assigned to who when. And then there's host automation, which is my favorite. It's the most persistent and it's the most reliable, and it just takes an extra step to set it up. Okay, so that's pretty much it. I wanted to look at just a couple of comments here. Very interested in the combining Dorico and Cubase. Yeah, me too. It's going to be pretty amazing if it works just as advertised. So I'm going to get into that in the next couple of days. Hey, Cubase, thanks very much for joining me today. Daylight savings is, yeah, kicking us all around, I'm sure. All right. Well, thanks so much, everybody, for coming out today. And if you're watching this video after the fact, please do like and subscribe. It helps me develop this channel a lot and keeps me encouraged to keep making the videos. I look forward to seeing everybody on Friday, and maybe I'll have some more updates about the Cubase 0.20 update. Check it out. There is a link in the description. Gives you all the information about the newest Cubase 14 update. And I'll see you guys around. All right. Take care. Bye.